Today on Yeti at Large, the MORryde cargo tray install.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out. Today on Yeti at Large, the MORryde cargo tray installation in our Alliance Avenue 32 RLS.
So our MORryde slide came today. This is the CTG 60-2660W. Cargo tray gray, 60%, one-way slide, 26 by 60 long. Let's unbox it. Going to go in this cargo compartment. This is a 2023 Alliance Avenue 32 RLS. One of the limiting factors is we don't have a lot of height here, which was a trade-off to not have the overall height like the Paradigm has. It's a little bit of a narrow compartment, and we're only going one way so that we'll have totes on the backside there by the water closet. We need to be real deliberate and specific with the totes and containers we put on it, but I'm hoping to mount my griddle. One of the main things with the slide is we're going to take the legs off of this, remove the tank, use a hose to connect to our supplementary propane port underneath the trailer, and do away with at least one of the wings, and have this on the end of the tray so we can slide it out and cook with ease. So the edge of the lip of the tray, the only moving part that's going to come out, I've got it set at 6. That gives us 1/4 of an inch plus or minus for a little margin of air, and we've got plenty of space on the other side. So this is starting to look like a relatively good position. So take a picture. Here's a man reading the instructions. So by removing a couple of the self-tapping sheet metal screws, we can see up into the underside of the deck. One of the nice things I discovered by reaching up under my gray tank is I can get my fingers quite a ways in there so they're not touching the bottom of the floor. So if I'm very careful with the depth that I go with the coarse thread screws into the decking, I should be safe. So I very carefully took the edge of the tray away, and I measured the thickness of the subdeck. I don't know if you can see that on YouTube land, but that's a solid 2 inches. So that's 2 inches before we even have a chance to get into the steel beam that's under there that we have 7 or 8 inches before the gray tanks start here. This is a real workspace right now. We have 2.5 inch, 1/4 inch bolts with a locking nylon nut holding it through the I-beam in the front. So the old adage of measure twice, cut once doesn't fit for me. It's more like measure 15 times, cut half, measure again, cut 3/4, etc., etc. These were the screws that were included with the MORryde trade system. It's a number 8 coarse thread machine screw, and it's 2.5 inches long. When I measured this deck, and this is the same floor that goes all the way through the lower level of the RV, and I've confirmed with the engineers at the factory, this has 2 inches of foam. Well, combined foam and OSB 5/8 thick sandwich is 2 inches tall. I have physically measured by taking out these little step buckets for the storage area on both sides. It's 2 inches consistently all the way across. I'm able to get my fingers between the gray tank and the bottom of this foam OSB sandwich. So what I'm doing is I've marked one of these 2.5 inch screws at the 2 inch mark. I'm drilling a pilot hole very carefully and predictably down through the foam sandwich and into the OSB. I'm stopping at the 2 inch mark, extracting my pointed screw and replacing it with a 2 inch version that I basically lopped off the first 1/2 inch and have a blunt end. This is not a how-to video. This is just how I did it video. And this is a weapon of mass destruction to an RV. Be very, very certain of what you're doing if you're going to start drilling holes. I use this guy to go through the pilot hole to work like a depth gauge and a locator. That's how I discovered I was on the front I-beam frame rail. Now there are several self-tapping sheet metal screws drilled into that I-beam where the underlayment blanket is drilled into. This is a weapon of choice for most RV manufacturers. Now I'm not a huge fan of the self-tapping sheet metal screw. I get why they use them because they're quick and efficient. It's one and done. Once I was certain where I was at, I went with a 3-inch long 1/4-inch hex head bolt with a nylon impregnated lock nut, and I used a washer on the bottom just to make sure I got good tension on it. These will never rattle loose, at least they're not likely to. And I saw for a fact that I had 2 of the MORryde slide holes right through a steel I-beam. I got a good amount of torque on these, very, very strong. That being said, my dream of getting 2 more on the other side wasn't going to happen. I would have to locate in between the 2 gray tanks to be able to get a stud in there. What I did was I went with the MORryde supplied 2.5-inch long coarse thread machine screws. That's a Phillips head. I went through and I cut off a 1/2 inch on 8 of those bolts. They look like this now. Let's get you a close-up. And I ground down the tips a little bit so they're a little bit smoother. The goal is that that will go right to the end of the OSB sandwich, foam sandwich, and there's a nylon wrap around that this won't penetrate that. I'll get 5/8 of an inch into that OSB, spread out over 4 connection points on either side. I've been reassured by the factory and by the drawings. There is no ABS plumbing, no PEX plumbing, and no wiring bundles in this zone. It's just those tanks I'm concerned about. So I sank one and it bit lovely. Let's sink another one. So I stop there at the Sharpie mark. I back out carefully, and then I take one of my blunt screws, and you should hear the hammer drill making contact at the end. And what's lovely is as I do this, I'm seeing the decking sandwiched down hard with the tray frame, and I believe that's going to give us a very strong grip. Take your time installing the tray. Slow and deliberate. Lift it over the stops. Slight stress test. I'm 250 pounds, and that's on the nose. It didn't budge. How much cargo space do we have? And that is 15.5 plus 3, that is 18.5. So I can get an 18.5-inch tall tote in here with a base at 22 3/4. I'm hoping to get 1, 2, 3 totes in here and then a griddle on the end. This might be a little high for the normal cook, but I am a very abnormal cook. So that was a very careful, very deliberate installation of the MORryde CTG60-2660W. One direction, 60%, 60-inch long cargo tray. I have intentions of mounting my griddle on the end of this and then 3 totes behind it for storage. We're going to dress out the rest of this cargo compartment with cordless tools, paper towels, gloves, etc., etc. Yeti at large.